By some, he's been called controversial.
I'll keep my freedom, I'll keep my guns, try to keep my money and my religion too. Now, keep in mind that some of my guests have been approached by, Homeland Security or FBI saying, why are you going on the Clay Douglas show?
My message to those guys, if they're listening this morning, is go get a cup of coffee. Maybe you'll learn something.
We both took the same oath, to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I don't recall there being an expiration date on that. I'm going to keep my big BA, keep my friends the same, keep the government out of my business, and y'all can keep the change.
He is the free American, Clay Douglas.
We know what we need. We know who to blame.
Catch the Free American Hour, weekdays at 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern.
I'll keep the USA and y'all can keep the change.
For the podcast and more details, visit www.freeamerican.com or catch the podcast by phone by calling 832-999-8621.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American Hour. I'm your host, Clay Douglas. My guest today will be John DiNardo. And let me set the stage for John. Let me set the stage with a quote from the Bible, and this is what we'll be talking about today.
And upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity. And the
Wait a minute, let me get all of it. Let's see if we got the whole thing here. Go.
Luke 21, verse 25 and 26. It says that Jesus gave a great warning. Here's what he said. And there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars. And upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, and the sea and waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things that are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. Now here is described an event that originates in what is called the heavens. Now we have three heavens. Number one, where the birds fly. Number two, outer space. Number three, God's throne. Whatever this is will cause the sun, the moon, and the stars to appear differently to us than they do now. The word distress in these verses, that it would bring great distress of the nations. It's number 4928 of the Greek section of the Strong's Concordance, and it means anxiety, anguish. Webster's Unabridged Dictionary gives this meaning: pain or suffering, anguish of body or mind. If you see something that is coming out of the heavens, and it is so awesome that it causes your heart to fail, where does that originate? It originates the fear in the mind. And so it said that there's pain and suffering, anguish of body and mind. The word perplexity here in Luke 21, 25 to 26 means a state of quandary. It means to have no way out. So here is the human race looking up into the sky, and they see no way out of utter destruction. Just like the dinosaurs. Don't roam the earth anymore, but certainly their skeletal systems are dug up. An extinction level event. Webster says of the word perplexity, confused mental condition because of a disturbing puzzling state of affairs. This is an event seen in the skies that people will think they have no way to escape from it.
John, let me go ahead and bring you up here for a minute here. Somebody made the comment that sounds like a Baptist preacher, and I don't know, I think it's what a Baptist preacher ought to be talking about, and they're not, are they?
No, Clay, but that's just one person who hasn't really listened. Once you listen some more, you'll see that it's not religion at all. It's
all right, I will keep it going.
A few more minutes.
But just what I've heard described so far certainly sounds like the advent of Planet X, or you know, a celestial body. But here, I will go ahead and listen to the rest of it.
Okay.
Death is a given. That's what they will think. What could be so terrible that Jesus said in Matthew 24, verse 22, the first part of the verse? And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. When you look the word saved up in the Greek section of the Strong's Concordance, it could mean spiritual or physical. And since this is talking about flesh being saved, it means being saved alive rather than everyone dying. So it's going to require a supernatural intervention by Jesus Christ to prevent this planet from dying. Everything on it. Scientists talk about a lost continent called Atlantis. The lost continents, did it really exist? None of us have been there.
Writing about it.
Could it be that nations have been destroyed before?
Wrote about it.
With few people remaining alive, but did not record the causes of the destruction and why their nation disappeared or a whole continent disappeared. A man by the name of Solon, S-O-L-O-N, who was a Greek historian. He was a philosopher and a statesman in Athens, Greece, between 639 and 559 BC. He traveled to Egypt and interacted with the historians from Egypt in his day, because Egypt was the greatest nation at that time. It had detailed records, great libraries of things that happened in the past. He made notes and writings from the Egyptians' history books. On one such visit, the Egyptian priests, who were pagan, but still they have eyes, they can read, they can write and record history, told Solon the following concerning the demise of Atlantis, and how there were recurring cataclysms that caused destructions from time to time. I will quote from the book Pole Shift, the section that he talked about here. You Greeks are but children. There is no old doctrine handed down among you, but by ancient traditions or any science which is of age. I will tell you the reason behind this. There have been and will be again many destructions of mankind out of many causes. The greatest having been brought about by earth fire and inundation, that means flooding. Whereas you Greeks and other nations did not keep records, imperishable records of Atlantis, we Egyptians did. And then after a long period of time, the usual inundation or flooding visits the earth like a pestilence and leaves only those of you who are destitute of letters and education. So the society died, except for the few. And thus you have to begin over again as children, having no knowledge as time raced by that there were events that happened in the past that were very devastating to the human race, and know nothing of what happened in ancient times, either among us or among yourselves. End of quote. That was from John White's book, Pole Shift, page 38. In other words, what the ancient Egyptian priests were telling the Greeks, historian at this time, was that many civilizations throughout history of our planet have been wiped out by a recurring catastrophe, something that would come along ever so often. These civilization-ending cataclysms not only destroyed many ancient cultures that we're digging up and the artifacts from them that prove they existed, but their written records and recorded history as well, forcing them literally to start over as children. As time went on, they would forget what caused the destruction. Recorded historians did not exist in many of these societies. So it is that these global cataclysms occurred, but many people scoffed because they didn't have the accurate information. Today I hope to give you some of the accurate information as to what this Bible prophecy that I've already read and many others, what it's all about. The Egyptians told Solon about the destroyed civilization called Atlantis. Atlantis was a series of islands that lay west of the Straits of Gibraltar, out into the Atlantic Ocean. Then the usual, as they said, inundation or flood struck the earth. It involved earthquakes and floods. They had a little warning. Atlantis was engulfed with ravages of the ocean. The waves overtook it. Huge tidal waves. Finally, Atlantis slipped between and under the great tidal waves, the giant waves, 3,000 feet in height, never to be seen or heard from again, but they lay deep under the oceans. In 1828, the Museum of Leiden in the Netherlands obtained a copy of a very old and ancient text known as Ipuwer, I-P-U-W-E-R, papyrus. And this was recorded in a book. This text describes a massive cataclysm that struck Egypt thousands of years ago. And they set forth a remarkable understanding of what has happened to many civilizations in the past in this papyrus. Statements from it reveal that the nation was totally devastated. Agriculture was destroyed. Both the upper and the lower Egyptian became wasteland. And we had the Great Sahara Desert as a direct result. Mr. A.H. Gardner wrote in a book concerning this particular papyrus that was in the Leiden Museum, quote, "It was no merely local disturbance that is here described, but a great and overwhelming national disaster," end of quote. Now, this ancient manuscript said that the earth turned upside down.
John DiNardo. It's still playing here, John. Hold on just a second. This is pretty interesting, John. You know, I wrote about that event that he just described 40 years ago. And I'm just bringing that back out now.
Well, it's really, this is the ideal time to be bringing that information out, because that coincides with the events that we see beginning to ramp up on planet Earth right now over the last several years. At that time you brought it out 40 years ago, nobody was interested, but now they will be.
Yeah, and I've got 40 years of research to back up everything I started 40 years ago. So shall I go ahead and let this little clip finish?
Yeah, if you could start from the beginning of that, those voices that we just heard a few seconds ago, the introduction there.
Yeah, let's see here.
It's like maybe about a half a minute ago.
Okay, we just got a little musical interlude here. And, you know, all the signs are that what happened to Atlantis is happening now to us. Hang on.
Isn't that a pole shift? It said that the sky was in confusion. Why would the sky be in confusion? It was the Earth that tilted on its axis, that was turned upside down and had a pole shift. Not the stars, not the sun, not the moon. They were constant as always. But it was from the perspective of human beings that the sky was in confusion. Could that have been referring to a time when the Earth altered its rotation? We'll see. It's recorded in history that it has happened. Whatever it was, it destroyed an entire nation, its cities, its agriculture, its infrastructure, highways, and so on. A tablet was found in El Arish, which is a monument that was erected between Judea and Egypt. On this tablet was inscribed a hieroglyphic message referring to a time when a great geological disaster struck ancient Egypt. Here's what it read, quote, in part. This is from the book, The Greatest Story Never Told, page 83. The land that was Egypt was in great affliction. Evil fell upon us. There was a great upheaval. There was such a tempest that neither men nor gods could see the faces of those beside them. End of quote. That's dark. Darkness. So that you couldn't even see someone sitting right next to you, or standing, or laying next to you. Other cultures have recorded great cataclysms about ancient Egypt, but it struck that nation as well as their own. The same book, The Greatest Story Never Told, page 83, had this to say, quote, "An exceedingly strong wind endured 7 days. On the 4th, 5th, and 6th day, the darkness was so dense that they could not stir from their places. The darkness was of such a nature that it could not be dispelled by artificial means. The light of a fire was either extinguished by a violent storm, or else it was made invisible and swallowed up in the density of the darkness. Nothing could be discerned. None were able to speak or hear. Thus they remain overwhelmed by the affliction. End of quote. What is this talking about? We'll see very shortly. The earth tells a great story as to what happened, and the Bible confirms it, and says that it's going to happen again. We have to ask ourselves what type of massive disaster could have caused such a physical disruption in Egypt, and other nations recorded it as happening to them also. The answer is actually handed down to us by the ancient Egyptians themselves. They maintain that these periodic planetary catastrophes involve the shifting of the Earth's rotation in space. Shifting of the Earth and its rotation. What would that do to everything on planet Earth and everyone?
All right, John?
Yes, Clay.
I wrote about this because, and the reason I wrote about it wasn't because I was psychic or anything necessarily, but I've read Velikovsky's Worlds in Collision, and that's actually the what I wrote. I wrote about the altering of the orbits of Mars and Venus, having them both come too close to Earth, and that same time period there. That's
Yes.
Go ahead. I'm
Well,
sorry.
yeah, this has happened in the past. When comets are drawn into our solar system, these comets, contrary to what the mass media has been giving you the deceptive or erroneous definition of comets, claiming that the comet is a dirty snowball, icy, and that's absolutely false. They've proven this already, and they have with their high technology space probes, they have discovered that the comets are massive objects. And of course, they don't want to change their projected mainstream description of a comet because it's embarrassing for them to have to withdraw their definition and change it and admit that they were wrong. But it's becoming so obvious that they don't know how they're going to tell the public the fact that comets are really massive. Well, when these comets come in, and why would they come in? Well, let me tell you, explain it to you from a very logical basis of physics. The natural laws of science that we see in operation every day of our lives. I'm a state certified to teach all of the sciences in high schools of New Jersey, and I'm a former high school physics teacher. So I'll give you some basic physics principles that will clearly explain why this would be happening, and why it is happening now that massive space bodies are being drawn into our solar system. It's all gravity. We see the principle of gravity in operation throughout our day, every day. And, when something falls off the edge of our table, goes through the edge of our table, it's going to fall to the ground because it is a gravitational force attraction between two masses. Everyone knows this. And that's why objects fall to the ground, and that's why we fall to the ground. Well, if you can imagine meteors that are captured in Earth's gravitational force field, will lay out in the fringes of, very weak fringes of Earth's gravitational force field. The meteors that come in are drawn in. Once they get even within the weak fringes of that force field, they're gradually drawn in by that pulling force and accelerated toward the Earth. Now, as we get closer to the Earth, Sir Isaac Newton's universal law of gravitation states that the force of attraction between the gravitational force of attraction between two bodies increases exponentially as the two bodies get closer together. So it's really a tremendous increase in the gravitational pull as this asteroid begins to plunge toward Earth. And consequently, because of this increase in gravitational force, you have a commensurate increase in gravitational acceleration. So the asteroid or the meteor begins to accelerate tremendously until it's falling to Earth so fast that the friction of the air heats up the asteroid or the meteor, and it begins to glow. The meteor begins to glow, and this is what we call shooting stars. Now, sometimes it gets so hot, the meteor gets so hot that it explodes before it hits the Earth. And that is a good thing, because then you do not have an impact. But if the meteor is large enough, then it will strike the Earth. And now we're getting more and more bolide or bullet-like strikes from meteors upon. These are called, when a meteor hits the Earth, it's called a meteorite. And these are occurring much more frequently now. The reason is that when comets are drawn in gravitationally to our solar system, well, let me explain first of all. These are drawn in not by Earth, but by the huge, incredibly great gravitational force field of our sun. You see, our sun is estimated to have a mass of about 1/3 of a million. 1/3 of a million Earth masses. So can you imagine the mass of the Earth multiplied by 1/3 of a million, and that's the mass of the sun. So when objects come close to our solar system, they get sucked into Earth to our sun's gravitational force field, even if they're as far out as Pluto, and they get pulled in and they begin to accelerate, just as I described with the asteroid or meteor accelerating, getting caught in Earth's gravitational field and accelerating, plummeting toward Earth. Well, likewise, you have the same acceleration of comets coming in toward the sun. Now, it will accelerate, the comet will accelerate toward the larger body, and therefore it will not hit Earth. It's aimed, its focus, its rendezvous is with the sun. But it will pass by Earth, over the top of Earth, and over all the planets that are coming in on its way toward the sun. And when it gets overhead or even below the Earth, doesn't matter whether it's soaring above the Earth or soaring below the Earth, if it gets close enough, it's going to cause gravitational forces that will be absolutely devastating to Earth. These gravitational forces act like a masseuse would act on a person's skin. The forces pull and massage the Earth's crust. Not only the Earth's crust, but the underlying mantle of the Earth, which is very thick, viscous, molten rock, many, many miles deep, much thicker than Earth's crust. This molten, sort of visualize it as chocolate pudding beneath the crust of the Earth. And visualize the Earth's crust as the skin that might form on top of chocolate pudding. And when you let it cool on the stove, you see the skin on top of